let's just talk about this. Let's try and rationalize it. Let's get past the emotional side of the conversation and just ground it. So it was never ever easy, but it was, once again, it's the journey, it's the perseverance of it. And that, I think, is the key word out of today's conversation, is the journey of it. Because it's not a one-time activity. You can't fix it just overnight. So what I always say to people is, start somewhere. Don't fear failure. The failure is if you do nothing at all. But if you're starting somewhere, you're actually making progress. And that's where people need to get to. Have the crucial conversation about money.
I'm Talana Simpson, and let's talk communication. Money talks. Well, we can look at that statement in a number of ways. Money talks as in it opens doors for you or closes, depending whether you have or don't have it. But also the talks that we need to be having about money, those are actually the ones that are way more important, because they impact so many parts of our lives in terms of choices we make or don't make, relationships. So yeah, it's a very important topic to have. So today we're going to be talking to Nigel Willmott. He is a money coach and financial planner, and he has a really strong passion for having crucial conversations around money matters. So let's talk a bit more with Nigel about how to talk more, how to converse and have those important conversations around this thing called money. So Nigel, I'd like to ask you a bit more about the story of how you got to be where you are, but to lead into that is maybe just to ask you, what does the word money conjure up for you?
Well, it's really quite a hard word to define, and I think that money, means a lot of things to different people. I've been involved in financial services now this is going to be my 30th year, and I think over the last 30 years, my experience personally, as well as advising clients and just working with consumers, money conjures up all sorts of things. It can be anything from a measure of wealth, a form of barter, a form of trade, a method of exchange. And we can even get into things like it's a measure of success for some people, lack of, too much, how much is enough. There's a whole lot of things that conjure up with money. And I think that, probably at this stage of life, for people who are under hard conditions, COVID, maybe losing their jobs, retrenchment, maybe reduction of income, starting up a new business. I think probably one of the main themes that goes with money right now is probably fear, scarcity. So it's a very broad subject. One would think that money is quite straightforward. Just give me more of it and I'll be okay. Not necessarily true.
No. So you said like you've had 30 years in this field. So maybe just tell us a bit more about that story, because I know now you focus a lot more on you use the word coaching around money and counseling and that. So just a brief background of how you got to be interested
in the game
now. Yeah.
So, I started at the age of 20 in the industry, and I don't think that financial planning was financial services was really my choice. I think at the stage I needed a job, so I found work in financial services. But I've been in it for 30 years. I think that when it comes to financial services, I've been involved in just about everything that there is to anything from corporate to both personal financial planning. So what that means is that I've worked with mid-size and large company pension funds, where you have several hundred, maybe several thousand employees. I've worked predominantly in the South African market. I had a brief stint working in the UK market in the pensions industry. So I've got a lot of experience in working with like boards of trustees who oversee the running of funds, and then also working with members or employees within those funds. And more of late, I sort of shifted out of what we call the employee benefits type aspect, where we're looking after pension funds and provident funds, and went more into specializing, looking at personal financial planning. In other words, dealing one-on-one with individuals. And I think it's just been a progression of my career over time, that probably from about the early 2000s, working within the pension fund type environment and dealing with members of funds, where we would do member communication sessions and we would talk about aspects of their retirement fund. It was always clear to me that people just didn't really understand the first thing about how their company retirement fund worked. What are death benefits? What are disability benefits? How is this money invested? All that they know is that they see some deduction come off their pay. Generally, there was mistrust as to where the money would go, how it would be used, who was overseeing it. And, I quickly started to realize 20 years ago already that financial education was just really, really lacking. And then that started to then grow into, needs for financial counseling. And then ultimately in the last 10 years, then sort of wrapping it up into like a more of a coaching mindset when it comes to dealing with, money concerns that people have. And that's something which I've always carried with me as a financial planner, is that, I think sometimes a financial planner just sounds too academic. It sounds almost maybe, it sounds inaccessible. It sounds cold and clinical. I don't want to get too hung up on terminology, but I prefer to call myself a money coach. And I think, that's really the essence of where financial planning has to go these days, is that, a financial planner, no matter what environment they work in, has to be more of a coach, utilizing aspects of education and counseling and coaching, as well as advice, and all of that wrapped up into basically the client experience. So that's kind of like a little bit of a legacy of where I've come from over the last 30 years. And I think that the psychology side of money, the relationship, the experience of it, how tangible is it, that's been lacking for a long time. And hence people don't really understand things to do with money.
What's been the impact of people not understanding things to do with money?
Well, can be not realizing personal and life dreams. It can be, financial recklessness, overconsumption, massive amounts of personal household debt. In South Africa, I did a follow-up article to some financial education programs that I released back in 2012 together with the Financial Planning Institute. It's a program called My Money 123. It was a financial education outreach program, which is still going 8 years later. And at that stage, when I wrote the material, South African households in 2012 were just over 1 trillion rand in debt. And when I revisited this topic, and I did a follow-up article towards the end of last year, we just crossed over 2 trillion rand in debt. That's a big number, and that's South African households. I'm not talking now businesses and whatever else. You can add small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and I would imagine that 2 trillion rand has probably progressed since December with the striking of COVID. I would imagine that that 2 trillion rand debt bubble has just got bigger. And that for me has always been a huge threat to social cohesion, because, if that money goes south and people lose their jobs, they can't service their debt, that 2 trillion rand is going to become distressed. And, then people will face foreclosures on their properties, their cars, maybe their small businesses, whatever it is. And I think that debt has become, a massive threat to people's financial planning, their financial freedom. And I think that for me is probably one of the biggest things that I see coming through is debt, and obviously a lack of savings, because we can't really have conversations about tomorrow. No savings means no tomorrow. And in fact, if you've got too much debt, then you're in negative savings.
Yeah, and you're just in survival mode. How to get through today.
Well, you are. And, as a financial planner, I can't talk to somebody about tomorrow. And if you think about it, financial planning is really, you're describing a future event. And the future event may be that you're going to retire at some stage. Or maybe you might have a medium-term life goal of buying a house, saving up for a bond, per deposit, maybe saving up for a deposit on a car, overseas holiday. The fact that in future you may become sick, disabled, even die. These are all future events. So essentially, I'm selling imagination. The problem is that if the client doesn't have positive cash flow, I can't provide them with a solution for tomorrow. So what I have to do is I have to coach them through today. And then we get into things like, so tell me what's your feelings with money, first recollections, what kind of person are you with money? And then even the things like, so tell me about like your income and your expenditure. What does that look like? What is your personal net worth, assets, liabilities, your debt? This is even before we get to a discussion of, okay, so what are we doing tomorrow? I often sometimes spend 6 months, maybe a year, just coaching a client from, the situation that they're in. Maybe the person's going through a divorce. Maybe they've lost their partner to disability or to death, to illness. Whatever stage of life they're in, maybe they can't afford to purchase a solution, or a solution is not even ready. It's not even right for them yet. You've got to actually coach them to get them to a stage where they can start thinking about tomorrow. And this is like, this for me is like where the trick is, this is the client connection. This is the client experience. This is where the real hard work happens in terms of the coaching aspect of money, financial planning.
So part of those important conversations that you have with clients, as you say, before you can even help them imagine a future and plan for it, is looking at their current situation. I think, and is that what you mean? Like you use the concept of money DNA or money memories. So I want to just ask a bit more about that and how it will influence whether we have a healthy or unhealthy relationship to money.
Well, to give you a bit of an example, how that may pan out is you might have a client who, once you start to understand their background, how they grew up as a child, for instance, the environment they grew up in, it could be along the lines of lack of, abundance, spoiled, rotten. I don't know. It could be a whole lot of things. So take somebody who maybe had like lack of, they may have grown up fearful of money. Maybe they saw parents fighting with money. Maybe they grew up in a single parent household. Maybe money was never really a good conversation. Maybe it was always used as a threat. Money doesn't grow on trees. What do you think are made of money? So obviously, so always the mantra was always negative about money. And, the person then sort of went through childhood, went into teens, and maybe their teenage years are hard. Maybe they had to go out and get a part-time job. Maybe they dropped out of school. Maybe they had to help fund their single parent or their parents. And, it comes through into adulthood. And, maybe subconsciously in the back of the mind, there's a negative feeling about money that might spill over into, for instance, then investing. So somebody who has a fear of loss may not invest appropriately because their bias is towards loss. So they'll always be risk averse. So they could go into their 20s where a younger person, I'm talking now if this is like a longer term type investment where one can take more investment risk, maybe they might be completely risk averse and they might go into something which is then a low performing investment purely because they're just risk averse because whatever money they put in, they don't want to see it lost. And then they may lose out on an opportunity because then essentially the money will never really grow at the pace that's necessary, for that younger person who's making a particular investment for a particular term. So these are how things can pan out. You could have somebody who grew up in a household where, money was just doled out. There was just no end of it. If I asked for it, I got it. And then, all of a sudden the person comes into early adulthood. Maybe, they're required to get out and stand on their own 2 feet, find a job, look after themselves. And all of a sudden, mom and dad ATMs no longer exist for whatever reason. And they may turn to credit to, fulfill their insatiable appetite for spending and, buying clothes and doing this and doing that and, buying things that they don't necessarily need. They're more focused on wants. So, I think that our first recollections of money, our money DNA, who's influenced us, I think often those things will pull through into adulthood in terms of, how we deal with money, how we use it, and essentially how we survive with it.
So if we want to have then, because I suppose our ultimate goal is always to have more money. It makes life a lot easier when you've got, cash in the bank account. So if we're trying to move towards, having a healthier relationship with money, in that there's more of it, it flows, we have access to money so that we can meet our needs and hopefully more. I think what you're saying is then place we need to start is looking at our previous, our money memories, as you call them, the DNA that we have around money. Because I think we so focus on just how do I earn more money today that we don't realize that a block might be from a memory we've got growing up.
Yeah, so this is such an expansive discussion that what could also happen is that you may be so fixed on career and earnings that maybe the neglect might be could be in someone's marriage, for instance. Could be neglect of your kids because you're obsessed with making so much money that maybe you're just unavailable. It almost becomes like your God in a sense, and it's a difficult subject to distill into just one thing. And the old question of how much is enough, I think that it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What do we need to take care of first? And this is often how I help people build budgets is, so we've got accommodation needs, we've got this basic security needs, where we live and food on the table. If we have children, are we educating them? Am I protecting myself? And maybe your income covers those things. These days, maybe you're fortunate that your income covers those things. Fantastic. We can debate whether or not I can make enough money to then buy myself a boat and a holiday home and all those other things. But, that's good. And it's good to have those goals, I guess, to get to those things. But this comes back to our value systems and, what it is that you value, what you want to get out of life. It's not the same thing for every person. For some people, it might be, that they want to accrue certain things, or they want to, have aspirations to do certain things. That's fine. I think that it's all going to have to just work in balance, and it's going to have to work in plan in terms of, one client to the next, because not everybody's going to be the same. But I think for me, the key thing though, is that, if I had to speak to kind of the general consumer that's out there, and not everybody's in the top 1%. If I talk to the general consumer that's out there, who might be kind of maybe lower income South Africa, middle income South Africa. I'm not necessarily talking to the upper income South African right now, because that will be a different style of conversation. But for those people that are just the ordinary people out there who are just trying to get through, this is really a very serious conversation in terms of what do I need to know when it comes to getting through today, getting through this week, getting through this month. These are key things which people need to know. And I think access to financial education often is like sparse, because getting back to money DNA, I don't know about you, any of your listeners or people that you know, but I mean, how often did you have people in your family or schooling, a friend who influenced you positively with money? Who do you go to if you've got a question about money? I find that a lot of people in their family structures, it doesn't really exist. At school, I think it's definitely not really discussed at school. I still don't think that in the school curriculum in any way, form or shape, even now, especially the previous years, we've never really dealt with money issues of any particular extent. So where do you go to for good, unbiased financial education and guidance without, maybe going somewhere where there's the fear of being sold a product? You want to go for guidance, but here, by the way, here, buy this product. Here's some debt to help you realize your dreams. Here's 100,000 Rand loan. It's the only thing that's going to get you going in life. Well, maybe it might. Start up a small business. But if it's just willy-nilly, then maybe it's not going to be the right thing for you. So, it's those kind of things that we need to have a conversation about.
So Nigel, so that's interesting. Like, there's definitely conversations that we need to be having more around money. It sounds like, and as you said, those with hopefully with people that are unbiased, that we believe is not trying to manipulate us, for their gain.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a bit more about those conversations, but the one part I think of all of this when it comes to having conversations is the emotions that are related to money. And you spoke earlier about, especially now in this challenging time with COVID-19, there's a lot of fear-based thinking and experience. I mean, people are losing incomes, which is, huge impact. So how do emotions then play a role in us managing our money? Why should we even be realizing that emotions are related to how we engage with our money?
So that spills over into a lot of things. I think that we can look at different avenues where maybe emotions may play a factor. So what comes to mind is, for instance, let's talk about maybe societal pressures. That can be peer pressure on teens, young adults, even just peer pressure on us as adults. So where do you live? What kids do you send your school to? What car do you drive? So I'm referring to sort of keeping up with the Joneses. And what kind of pressures, what tugs at our emotions, social strata, aspirations, who am I trying to impress? So there can be those kind of emotions, and that can be hard for some people to keep up with, because if you're not earning enough, what's going to fund the gap is debt. So there's emotional aspects. What am I trying to realize for myself as a person? What am I benchmarking myself against? And that may put pressure on me to compete in a space that maybe I can't compete in. And this goes for teenagers, it goes for young adults, and obviously adults. So there's a lot of pressures around that. The kind of car I drive, the kind of clothes I wear, the brand I wear, and that's very much a wants type conversation. So we've got needs on the one hand, and we've got wants, and which one are we addressing? And often the wants space is purely driven by behavior and choices, and making or sometimes the wrong choice. And then it also spills over into other emotions around how we invest and fear. So I'll give you an example. So I think the investment market started to, when COVID started to hit late February, the market was coming off, say the JSE was coming off at about 52,000 points, and then it was dropping down to say 36,000, and it's made a V-shaped recovery, and it's come back to where it is now at like 55,000 points. And that sort of topsy-turvy, it loses the it can influence the investor in terms of do I take my investments out? Is COVID going to is it going to halve my investments? Is it going to destroy my investments? Maybe there's the impact of I'm going to be retrenched. I don't want my little bit of savings that I've got to be destroyed as well. Maybe I should just pull it all out of the market. Maybe I should start canceling policies. And one of the first things that people cancel is they may cancel things like their life cover, or they may reduce it, or they may reduce their savings. These are obviously natural things that people are going to think about because we're in hard times now. Money, the money supply is maybe stressed. And this is where emotion starts to come into play. And, I've seen it all too often where people have canceled policies, maybe canceled their cover, and all of a sudden something happens, and that cover that was in place has either been lost or canceled or reduced. And I think that's where, once again, from a coaching point of view, you need a financial planner that's working with you to allay your fears, keep you on track, keep you on your journey, keep you invested as you should be invested, see the bigger picture, be careful that you don't go canceling policies, risk cover just willy-nilly. That's where, good coaches need to ground people in terms of, okay, let me just get you through your fears of today. Let's keep focus on the big picture, and let me coach you through the next 6 months, maybe the next year, because I think that this COVID issue is probably going to be with us for the rest of 2020. And then we'd need to see what the new normal may look like going into 2021. But this is where people really do need to be grounded, and their emotions should not get the better of them.
So what we're saying then is just to be aware that emotions can influence your financial decisions, but not always in a positive way.
Well, yes, and I think this also leads to one of the other questions that you'd posed to me I'll give you an example. So like when it comes to purchasing a vehicle for personal use, a car, and I went through this with my oldest son, and when it came to him starting to work and earn his own income, and it came to purchasing a car, what we did together between the two of us is we kind of worked it in reverse, and we had a look at his budget, we had a look at his income, any expenditure that he's got. Once we'd worked all of that out, and we then were able to determine what he would be able to afford as a monthly premium to pay off a car. We then worked that back to a capital amount. And then that gave him the direction in terms of, this is the capital amount that you've got available to go out and buy a car. Often what happens when it comes to buying a car, it's purely an emotional purchase. Yes. If you ever look at how car advertisers do their thing, it's all about, the car, the look, the places you can go, all the bravado. Great. I mean, that's advertising. But the thing is that you could get somebody who purchases a vehicle, maybe on a 30% or a 40% residual, and they take it over a 72-month term. They've just made a lot of debt. Maybe they get bored with the car in 2 or 3 years' time, but then they're locked into it because they can't really get rid of it. So what we did together was we rather worked out what he could afford on a monthly basis. We worked out maintenance costs. We worked out his insurance. And then he could then comfortably, without extending himself, he could work out what he could afford to pay back on a monthly basis. We worked that back to a capital amount. And then the capital amount, I think it worked out at about, I don't know, it could have been, say, 180,000. That then at least had in his mindset that he could then say, okay, I'm going to go to the market and see what I can get for 180,000. That might be like a very good second hand, like a nearly new or whatever, but at least it managed his expectations in terms of what he could or couldn't afford. And then it wasn't an emotional purchase anymore. It was actually a good business purchase, so that it made business sense to him in terms of how to work it out. What could I afford? Take the emotion out of it. Let me not make a financial mistake that I'll regret in a year or two's time. Once the euphoria of the car and the smell inside wears off, and then I'm stuck with this like burden from a financial point of view. Let me make the right choice immediately. And that's where obviously emotion played a big role, together with all the other things I've mentioned to you around, budgeting techniques, affordability techniques, maintenance costs, time. People don't really take the time to consider when they make any kind of emotional purchase, such as buying a car.
So it sounds like you were able to have quite a constructive conversation then with your son, and it's obviously someone, usually family members are the more difficult ones. They because they're so close to us and we care so much, it can become quite an emotional conversation. So what did you do to set that up? How do you think, what facilitated you to have such a constructive conversation with your son?
So that's a good question. And, one thing which we've always done as a family, right from the word go, is that, when the kids are going through their teens, we started to slowly but surely teach them the value of money. Anything from delayed gratification as opposed to instant gratification, to things like work equals reward, savings and patience. You can't have it right now. Let's work together and save for it, maybe put goals in place, achieve those goals. We can monetize some of those goals. And, just small things like that all start to form part of the overall jigsaw puzzle. And one of the things that we did quite effectively is that right throughout their teens and into their adulthood, we used to include our kids in the family budget. So every month, we would meet as a family, and what's mom and dad earning? What does our expenses look like? In other words, if I had to run my family like as a business, what's the income? What's the expenditure? What's the bottom line? And then, the thing is that the kids always then felt like they were empowered and part of the conversation to see how money works. So then there was never really odd kind of expectations of, mom, dad, what can you do for me? Can you buy me these brands? Can you get me this stuff? Can you do this for me? Can you do that? Because they always knew what the financial DNA of our family was. So we've always had very open conversations about money and money skills and seeing money in action. Other things that I did with my kids is that, we would start doing investing together. So I'd start to show them very basically, how investments work. So if we opened up a savings of say 200 Rand a month or 300 Rand a month, sit down and actually discuss how the investment works. What are we investing in? They're a teenager, they understand this. If you go through the fact sheet, you can see what shares they're investing in. They can see what the cost of these things are. They can see the growth of it. And then they can actually see that for the 200 Rand that I put in, maybe it turns into 220 Rand. Or it turns into 180 Rand. And why? That's okay, because then the market went back, and this is the reason why. And if you do this as like a slow but sure, it takes years, and it did. And then, when they get to their early adulthood, they've already got these skills that just becomes like just second nature. It's not even a debate anymore. And, that's just something which we always purposely looked at is, I've just seen it far too often in families where crucial conversations about money, they just don't exist. And all of a sudden it gets to a stage where something will lead into maybe like a blow up or some kind of fallout. And then maybe it's too late. I always say to my clients or to people at large, one of the key things you've got to do is you've got to educate children about money. The first time they start to use it, ask for it, start wanting to buy things, that's the right time to start just talking about money. Just retorting back, what do you think of them? Am I made of money? Or money doesn't grow on trees? Those kind of conversations don't really go anywhere. This, once again, it's coming back to coaching and mentoring. And coaching and mentoring kids from youngsters to teens and to young adulthood, it's a crucial skill. I would argue and say that probably money skills are one of the most crucial skills that you can pass on to your kids, because it'll help them to be independent and make good decisions in life. Because let's face it, money is just part of everything in life. Very few things come for free. And we need to have good money skills. So yeah, I think it's a crucial skill you can pass on to your children.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like at the start, you were able to pass on a lot to your children because of your knowledge around that, your existing money skills.
Yes.
So if people don't have that, it might be that that's their starting point, is for them to learn more about money and maybe take their children with them on that journey. But that's, yeah.
So you raise a good point, is that, money skills is not necessarily, it didn't necessarily come about, let's say, because I'm a financial planner. Anybody can adopt good money skills, and it doesn't have to be, it's not based on whether or not I have a degree or I'm some super bright, intelligent person, or whatever. I've worked with all sorts. I've done workshops and all over the country, and you'll have people that come out in these workshops, and the inventiveness and the creativeness and the things that they're doing to upskill themselves in terms of earnings, expenditure, how I use it, how I save it, what do I hold back, what are needs, what are wants. These are just ordinary people who have just made it their thing to just adopt good money hygiene and, just really take good care of themselves and adopt good money skills. Anybody can do it. It's just a matter of adopting the right principles. And the word that I always start with is you've got to have a budget in place. you don't have a budget in place and you manage your income and your expenditure, then you're running your life on autopilot. And then, from one month to the next, you're always going to be stuck in the doldrums of, I just can't seem to get out of this money hole. And, if you're not running a budget, at least, then you're never going to be able to diagnose yourself in terms of where you're going wrong. And the one technique which I always tell people to do, it's like if I want to run Comrades, I'm not going to start running a week before and then decide to go and run it. It's going to be a gradual process. It's going to be a process of maybe a year. I'm going to have to measure my weight, measure my diet, measure my running times. I'm going to start writing it down. I'm going to start documenting. I'm going to start measuring my progress to when I'm going to become running fit. So I have some people who come to me and say, Nigel, I'm struggling with money. I don't know where to start. I said, well, a good place to start is for 3 months. And I say, it's always my 3-month, my 90-day challenge. Keep a diary, keep a little pocketbook. Every single financial transaction that you do, write it down for 90 days. Reconcile it at the end of every month. Bring it back to your budget. You'll be able to see exactly where you're blowing all your money. And then very quickly, within a month or two, you'll be able to start to see where exactly all your wasteful expenditure is. All your bad choices, all your bad habits, the this, the that, the this, the that, that's in denial in your head. Now you'll see it on full display. Then it's up to you then, because now you've got the knowledge and you know where you're spending your money. It's up to you now to adopt a different lifestyle and say, okay, I'll learn from month 1. I'll learn from month 2, month 3. By the time it gets to month 3 and you've been doing this for 90 days, I can assure you that on display, you'll be able to know exactly where your money's going, and then it'll be up to you to decide, okay, I know how to turn my life around now. I can see how much I'm blowing on X, Y, Z, and I need to change those things. We need to be able to self-diagnose ourselves. That's not some fancy app. That's not some fancy tool. That's not necessarily having some fancy IQ. It's just a matter of then taking the time just to track yourself and measure your money discipline. And then say, aha, okay, guys, as a family or me as an individual, this is where I'm going wrong. This is where I'm blowing it. This is where I need to make a change in my life. And then if I do, I can then see that I'm going to free up 1,000 Rand, 2,000 Rand, 5,000 Rand. If I can do that, then I can start to point that at blowing my debt quicker. If I get the debt out of the way and I've got positive cash flow, then I can start to look at savings. It's kind of the ABC or the 1, 2, 3 of money. Plan better, keep your debt manageable, and save. If you're doing those 3 things, which doesn't take rocket science, you will be financially free. How difficult is that? It sounds easy, but it's not easy. But often the challenge is up here. Yes, of course, there's going to be circumstance. There could be other things, retrenchment, illness, whatever. There's those things as well. But, something else that I can touch on for you as well is do you have an emergency fund? This is something which I always talk to people about. Do you have an emergency fund? And I don't want to be the told you so type of person, but, let's say, for instance, if something like COVID strikes or retrenchment or something, if you've got 3 months worth of emergency fund money tucked away, or better still, up to 6 months of expenses, life's problems a whole lot better. Why? Because what you've done is you've preempted that stuff in life is going to happen. And let's face it, stuff in life does happen.
Yes.
Stuff that we can't necessarily anticipate, but we know that potentially it's going to happen. So if, as part of your budget, you've seeded growing yourself an emergency fund and you've got 3 months tucked away, you're going to be able to endure those knocks a lot better. Because if you don't have the emergency funds in place, what are you going to turn to? You're going to turn to your bond, if you've got it. You're going to turn to your credit card, if you've got it. A family relative, or whatever. And then the emotional aspects start to raise the ugly head again because it creates stress. So this is always going to be like a constant plan. I always talk to clients about building your plan, building a money map, building and creating your financial plan. There's all these aspects that one needs to consider. I think probably what you're starting to see is that, money, it sounds a simple word. It's just 6 letters, 5. But there's so much to talk about. It's a huge subject.
Yeah, and I think it's because there's so much meaning and so many impacts from money, and the impacts affects our day quality of life, our day-to-day life.
Even right down to other things, that I can just put out there, like as a checklist is, besides just managing your income and your expenditure and managing your exposure to bad debt and always trying to have like a savings mindset, those are all very well. But then there's other aspects, like for instance, do you have a will? And one of the things that I've found over the years is that South Africans, or people in general, maybe they just think that they're never going to die. I don't know. I mean, the amount of people sometimes who just don't have a will, it bowls me, because if you die without a will, you leave behind a feud. You don't leave behind a legacy. If you don't have a will in place, you die intestate, then it gets turned over to the master of the court, and it can take very long to process. And the people that you leave behind, you leave them distressed. Things like, do you have a will? Are you adequately insured? Nominations of beneficiaries on your insurance. Make sure that your nominations of beneficiaries are in place and accurately noted. When was the last time you actually dusted off your will and made sure that it was, relevant to your stage of life? Your beneficiaries on your policies, are they relevant? These are all things that people just like, that people really need to pay attention to on a regular basis. It's not something which necessarily we should be doing once a year or, once every 2 years. I always say to my clients that money is not a one-time activity. It's got to be a permanent activity. If you want good results, you go to the gym. You want good results, you generally go maybe 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 5 times a week. You don't go once a month and expect to look great. And the same thing goes with your money. We can't just check in every now and then. It's something which you just got to have as like a daily discipline, a weekly discipline, like a lifestyle.
Yeah, it is part of your lifestyle. But part of it then is being able to have, as you said, those crucial conversations. And you've noticed that very few families can have those or do have those conversations. And I think it's because, like you're saying, one of those conversations is around the will. You actually have to, as an individual, face the reality that you might die one day and leave people. So it's a very difficult emotional conversation. It's interesting that money leads to our impermanence. I mean, it's like it's linked to that. So what I wanted to ask you, because I think there's a big part, we also hear how relationships, husband and wives, intimate relationships, people you live with, money is usually what can destroy, or the lack of money, or maybe put it this way, not having those crucial conversations constructively can break relationships. So I wanted to just ask some tips about those conversations in terms of your experience. How could we broach those topics of, listen, people, I might die one day and I want you to at least be looked after. So I'm going to write up a will.
So, between partners, couples, having conversations about money, for some might be easier than others. And, obviously, often there can be circumstances but I'm speaking very generally now. And I mean, this is a very emotional part of planning. And, when I deal with a couple is I try and always get a sense of, who's who in the relationship. Is there a spender? Who's the spender? Who's the saver? Are we on the same page as money? Are we sharing information with each other about money? How transparent is money in your relationship? You'll be surprised that, the one partner to the other may have never had sight of their will. They may not know what they earn. They may not even know if they're a nominated beneficiary on policies. Sometimes you see the worst of it, and sometimes you see also the best of it. It's like having two directors in a business, and if I'm not being transparent with my fellow director running the business, then do you think the business is going to be successful, financially speaking?
Probably not.
No, it won't. And I think it's also, so I think that what I try and encourage people who are, in partnership, live-in relationship, a marriage, whatever, I try and encourage people to be as open as possible when it comes to money. A good place to start is doing a budget together. So what resource do we have? In other words, income, and what expenditure is going out as part of our partnership. What income is coming in? What money is going out? what are our aspirations together? Where do we see ourselves in a year's time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time?
Yeah, so that's almost like the structure of how to have that conversation. So any tips that you would give people who find it difficult to even start that, or also what comes from that is you can see one person is the spender, one's the saver.
So it's going to be a delicate conversation,
Yeah.
because often what you can't do is tell, so, the coach will rather listen and guide, and often the client will work it out for themselves. They probably know the answer already. As a coach, you've just got to guide and let the client, lead you. And this is not a quick fix. One of the things I find works well is I will encourage my couples to set it as a date night. If you're not used to doing these things, set it as a date night. Get a quiet part of the house. Try not have the kids as a distraction or any other distractions. Maybe just put your cell phones off, do whatever. Sit down with a laptop, an Excel spreadsheet, a piece of paper, or whatever. If you want to, if it's a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever, I'm not advocating anything there. Maybe just like tea or a cold drink would be best for now. And just try it. Set it as a date night. Maybe at a particular time of the month when we know that income is coming in and we're just about to start paying debit orders and setting ourselves up for the month, have a date night. Set aside an hour and, try it. If it's the first time that you're going to be doing it, maybe each of you prep individually. Maybe take a few points that you want to take into your meeting, have a discussion, and try it. Start somewhere. Maybe the first session doesn't go that great, but don't give up. Start somewhere. Start small. Start to pool your resources. And at the end of the day, you're a team, so work together as a team, and money's going to be an essential part of that. And then slowly but surely, it's going to start to then fan out into other things. It might take you 6 months to start to get used to the fact of, okay, we're understanding our resources, we're understanding our expenditure, we're doing now money as a team. We're doing life as a team, but now we're also incorporating our money aspects of our unity in a sense. And then that can start to spill over into other things, So, hey, what happens if one day you're not here anymore? What happens, not if, but when you die? What does that mean to me as the person who stays behind? What's the legacy going to be here? Are the kids going to be adequately taken care of? Do we have enough insurance in place? Do we have a will? No, we don't. Okay, so let's put one together. What's going to go into that? Let's have a conversation about that. The last thing that you want is this to be a surprise that, the partner dies and then all of a sudden this will gets opened up and then everybody's flabbergasted because the stuff that's in there just doesn't even make any sense. I don't know. I think, look, it's everybody's preference as to what they prefer to do. I can't necessarily tell people what to do, but...
No, but if you just come together, if I can just unpack, then what I'm hearing is the way to have these conversations is one is to understand the importance of it, because that then gives us the courage to start it, but then it's the intention that and setting time aside. So actually saying to your partner, we need to have this conversation, setting up a time, to date night, making it distract. So that's always useful for difficult conversations. Prepping beforehand individually and then going together and allowing it to remember it's a journey. It's not a once-off conversation, as you keep saying.
Correct.
So we're going to start here, and from that we come up with actions that we go away and then we reflect and we come back again. And as you say, it then gives us the opportunity, if we are concerned about, say, our partner dying, that we can put that on the table at the next date night.
And often what I've done with couples is I've worked as the mediator, and this works very well because I'm not emotionally attached to either. So I'll be coming in as the voice of reason as far as financial planning goes. And, I will often then mediate between the two people.
Yeah.
So each one can come in with their strengths and weaknesses. Me as the coach, I will facilitate the meeting. I'll often set the tone and the pace and the objectives, the outcomes. And I find that I normally do these for, let's say, 3 to 6 months. The journey over those 3 to 6 months from where they start to then where they get to, it really is truly like, it's like life inspiring, because the turnaround in their lives, the freedom that they find, all of a sudden, the manageability of money, the angst around it, maybe secrecies or fears, phobias, like whatever's going on, those things start to evaporate, and there's not a barrier to their relationship anymore. And you actually see their lives start to really take on this whole different form, because now all of a sudden we start to feel empowered that, gee, you know what, collectively, the two of us, we're looking at what we want to do next year. We're looking at goals for 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. And as you say, it becomes like the journey. So what I always say to people is, start somewhere. Don't fear failure. The failure is if you do nothing at all. But if you're starting somewhere, you're actually making progress. And that's where, people need to get to. Have the crucial conversation about money. Have the crucial conversation with your partner. If it means then after a few months you start drawing in your children, then you start drawing in as a family, and then you really are starting to win, because, inadvertently then through your leadership, your example, you then automatically start teaching your kids money skills, because they see it on display. They see what maybe their folks are doing, or whoever it may be, and then that starts to set the tone for them, because they start to take it in, and they process it in their own way. So that, would then be a very, very good coached experience, whether you have a coach or whether you don't, whether you self-coach or you bring in a mediator like me, a good financial planner who can do these types of things, then, you've got a good winning recipe.
Absolutely. So is there a time then you can share a bit more personally about a time where you had a conversation that counted in your life, and what helped you have that conversation and what maybe didn't, or how it went?
Well, I think that, in terms of having, and in keeping with this, with the subject of money, the conversations that I've had with my children over time, they were never always easy conversations. And I don't want to create the misperception that this was all just, fell into place and it was happy days, because it wasn't. There were, there were times when these conversations were difficult about money, and sort of, especially when they were teenagers and young adults, and trying to manage their expectations, the conversations didn't always necessarily go well. Sometimes the conversations were difficult, but it's the consistency of the conversation, coming back to the same values, just grounding the conversation and not dropping the ball, but just always persevering with it. After a while, these things do start to they start to make sense, and they start to manifest in the appropriate way. So, for me, having conversations within my family and having conversations with my boys as far as leading themselves with money and life, I think it stood them in good stead in terms of, what helped to shape them as individuals. And, that's for me is a great outcome, and it's an outcome that I'm very appreciative of. But it was never always easy, and often I felt like, the conversation almost contrary to what was going off in society, because society's like, yeah, give, you can have, and I'm sort of saying, guys, hang on a sec, let's just talk about this, let's try and rationalize it, let's get past the emotional side of the conversation and just ground it. So it was never ever easy, but it was, once again, it's the journey, it's the perseverance of it. And that, I think, is the key word out of today's conversation, is the journey of it, because it's not a one-time activity. You can't fix it just overnight.
Yeah, it's being consistent with a message and persevering. Yeah. So how can people get hold of you if they'd like to chat with you more, further about this?
So people can always reach out to me. Just connect with me through LinkedIn. I think is a good place to always start.
So if they just search Nigel Willmott,
that's it. Drop me a note. Any questions they might have, pointers, tips, and guidance. A lot of this stuff one may assume is common sense, but it's not. It's not easy, and people don't know where to start. So they can reach out. LinkedIn's a good place. It's kind of a good part of point of access. And there's also reading material that's there. I've written a number of articles that are all these themes. A lot of the articles that I write are very much self-help. how to budget, how to save, how to limit debt. There's a ton of material on my LinkedIn page. People can download them and basically implement them today in their lives, and they'll find turnaround just through that. So they can also just see what's there and utilize what they need to.
Great, and I'll put that link in the show notes.
Thank you.
So to end off, welcome to share any closing thoughts. And I always ask this question as we wrap up is, what is the conversation that you believe we need to have more of today that would make the world a better place?
So in sticking with the theme around money, what I also try and have a conversation around is, how can I uplift other people as far as money skills? And if I can help you with money skills, and I can help to make a difference in your life as far as your ability with money goes, having a conversation around money, if it can help you to educate you, to help you to build a small business, to help you to feel that you've got a bit more independence, maybe some dignity, some sort of purpose. I think that those are good conversations to have, because it will help to uplift a person, and then in turn, that person then uplifts another 4 or 5 people in their family and their community. So, for me, I think having good money conversations, and also giving, those of us that have got the resource, give it, and give it freely. I always try and give financial education as freely as possible, because I don't own it, and if I can give it for free and make a difference to someone, a tip on educating somebody financially speaking, then and they go out to make an improvement in their life, I think that is good for them, their community, their family. It'll help them to empower themselves.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for sharing today. Thank you, Nigel.
And thank you. Nice to be on your podcast.
To learn more about my guest, Nigel Willmott, and also my podcast, please go to my website, which is innercoaching.co.za/talk communication. And I hope that from what Nigel shared with us today, you can take some of those tips and even exercises he gave in order to manage your money better. But most importantly, start having those crucial conversations around money in your life. Thank you for listening. It's a wrap.